What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. It is Thursday, a great day, Friday Eve, almost the weekend, here in a very rainy and gloomy Miami. I don't know if you guys are aware of how absolutely gloomy it is. It is wild down here. We are preparing for like a massive cyclone, apparently, which is a wild reality that I have yet to really live through too much, but is a new thing that I get to experience these days. And I'm hopeful that I'm still able to catch my flight to Phoenix, Arizona this weekend. I hope to see some of you guys there at Turning Point USA's AmFest or America Fest. I know several of you have already told me that you are headed that way. So excited about that in just a couple of days. Welcome to the stream. If you are joining us for the first time, especially over on Instagram, you guys might remember yesterday we started streaming on Instagram for the very, very first time, which is super exciting for us because Instagram just rolled out RTMP streaming, meaning the stream that we existingly have had going on for the last year or so on YouTube, on Rumble, on Getter, on Locals, and of course on Facebook as well. We are now able to bring directly to you, our largest community in the Isabel Brown gang over here on Instagram. So welcome if you are new. Make sure you introduce yourself to us in our live chat and use the chat throughout our entire conversation today for some very fun stuff to talk about. Today is a wild stream. So I'm going to invite everybody to just put their tinfoil hats on here for a moment. We're going to play a game that I love to play called the tinfoil hat game on the stream today. The internet is like totally abuzz with a brand new conspiracy theory that I'm not super familiar with, but I thought it would be fun for us to unpack in real time on the stream together, specifically about something from the entertainment industry called predictive programming. I'm not sure, chat, if you guys have like learned much about this or at all familiar with what predictive programming is, but it's super interesting because essentially what people are arguing is that Hollywood is creating movies and books and other things in the entertainment industry related to things that we would consume for fun that are fiction, that are instead setting us up for things that probably will happen in the future so that we are more emotionally prepared for it or somehow societally or culturally in awareness of what's going on well in advance of when these things happen. So really crazy stuff. There's a new movie trailer out from A24 Studios. If you've never heard of them before, they're not technically like in Hollywood the same way that a lot of other movie studios are. But most recently they had their film Everything Everywhere All at Once win Best Picture at the Oscars. Really interesting movie studio. Put out a trailer for their new movie called Civil War that's coming out next spring. We're going to watch it together. It's a lot to unpack, so get freaking excited for all of that. First, though, especially if you are new to the stream, you might not know, we like to keep things as community-oriented as possible over here. So we're going to say hi to some people in our live chat. This is a true live stream, meaning it's happening in real time, and we like getting to know you guys as best as we possibly can. As people are taking a second to drop their name, where they're watching from, and if they're a first-time viewer, over in our chat, either off to the side or right below you, depending on where you are watching, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have already liked the stream today, and don't forget to do so if you haven't already. Hit that little thumbs up or a heart button, depending on where you're watching. And most importantly, if you're new around here, I am a totally independent creator, meaning there is no massive budget to grow all of these channels and accounts. It's all grassroots thanks to you guys and your support. So if you can take a very quick second and hit the follow or subscribe button on whatever platform you're watching on right now, it's totally free to watch these streams. It will always be free to watch these streams. We're just hopeful that we're able to have these important truth-based conversations in a world that really needs to happen with more and more people every single day. All right, let's start over on Rumble today, kicking us off very strong. We've got Mike Quilwin and John Best and Tuco Wright tuning in. Omnifus is watching. Chief is watching from Scotland. So very cool. I will be in your beautiful country late next summer, which I'm super excited about. Mr. Neal says, new viewer here, saw you on People of the Internet with Dave. If you guys didn't already know this, I'm co-hosting a new show we started a couple of weeks ago. That's a live call-in show with Dave Rubin at 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday, called People of the Internet. It is a very fun time, and we hope that you guys all will have a chance to call in live at some point soon. Over on Locals, we've got Tito, Magic Def, Alex Padron, Crazy Cat Lady, Xanthi, Magic Def, and more. YouTube, let's shout out just a couple people. Phoenix, Naruto, Michael, great to see you. A freckled man is here in the chat. We've got Deku, greetings from sunny California. It's sunnier than how it is in Florida today, let me tell you. Nitty Witty is kicking things off for us over on Getter, and on Instagram, you guys are blowing up the chat, which is awesome to see. We've got Alexis, Uncharted Horizon, Amelia, hi my sister. She finished her college finals today in Fort Worth, Texas. She says, my support is the backbone of your channel. Well, you're not wrong. Amelia is my youngest baby sister, and I can't wait to give her a very big hug sometime soon. Okay, jumping right in to what I want to talk about on the stream today. I don't know if you guys all in the chat have heard about predictive programming before. Also, if our formatting looks a little bit off on Instagram, it's because we're still figuring out how to make it look good on Instagram. It automatically crops us in like right here, even though the stream is actually horizontal. So just bear with us as we figure that out in the next couple of days. But I don't know if you guys have heard of this term, predictive programming. It is so bizarre and like the weirdest rabbit hole that I've ever possibly gone down today. I've spent most of my day looking into this, and it has really honestly blown my mind in the past couple of hours. But there's this entire tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that Hollywood and authors and people in positions of power are strategically creating fictional stories and planting them in advance of actual things that are going to happen in real life in the three-dimensional world, so that we will be mentally and emotionally accustomed and ready and conditioned for when those things actually happen. And the reason I went down this rabbit hole today, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, is the Hollywood movie studio, quasi-Hollywood movie studio, A24 Films, has put out a new trailer for their new movie called Civil War that's expected to come out next spring, so spring of 2024. And it's a fascinating commentary on what happens in a future dystopian America where half of the states are thinking about or already have seceded from the Union and are at war with our federal government, largely over political differences. So I thought we should watch the trailer together first. We'll pause it and react to it here and there. And then there's some really interesting commentary on Twitter about some missing imagery, or if you like really deep dive in the imagery of this trailer, what it actually all means. So we'll go through that together. But then I want us to zoom way back out and look at all of the examples of predictive programming that have fueled this conspiracy theory, because it's actually kind of shocking. If you look at example by example by example throughout history, your brain is probably going to melt a little bit. Again, if you're watching on Instagram, sorry, this might get a little bit cut off on the sides, but you will be able to still get a pretty good feel for what this trailer of this movie actually looks like. So without further ado, I present to you the trailer for Civil War from A24 Movie Studios.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president.
Did you hear that? The Florida Alliance. We're going to come back to that. Trust me.
Assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Citizens of America.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California
Have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
We're moving to D.C. today.
You need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says.
This is like, by the way, just the imagery of this really, really reminds me of The Last of Us from HBO. I don't know if you guys have watched the show. It's absolutely incredible. HBO's adaptation of it is the TV show. It was originally a video game, one of my favorite shows ever done. But this imagery really, really, really reminds me of The Last of Us.
This is death. Bloody.
Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you?
What kind of American are you? Ooh, that's interesting.
You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
So if you didn't hear that, the Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th. So the people that have seceded from the Union are marching on DC to like take back their country, I guess. I don't know the full plot yet. Obviously, this was the very first trailer that just dropped, but the Western forces, the people that have seceded, will arrive to reclaim their country, to fight for their country on the 4th of July in the White House in Washington, D.C.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car! Move, move, move!
All empires fall. All empires fall. Interesting.
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
Civil War. So it's coming to IMAX and movie theaters spring of 2024. Really insane, bizarre movie trailer there, right? Like, I'm not the only one that was just, A, I think it looks like a really good movie, but B, it feels like eerily possible that something like this could happen in the next couple of years, in the next couple of decades, within the near future. So this trailer gets put out, and Twitter today, I refuse to call it X, you will learn this about me if you are new, has gone completely ablaze with conspiracy theories about this particular trailer, that it is in fact participating in what we have called and what many have dubbed predictive programming in the past, where books, movies, TV shows, plays, etc. have been specifically designed and set up to emotionally prepare you for something that does inevitably happen. So we paused that a few times. I mentioned a few little buzzwords that were in there, but people on Twitter have like really deep dived and scrubbed through this movie trailer to figure out some of the subtle messaging that might mean this movie is participating in predictive programming. So let's read some of it together. Again, apologies if this looks a little bit bizarre on Instagram, but we're figuring it out in the next couple of days. So this is from Ultra MJ Truth on Twitter. He says, Civil War, a new film coming to America in the spring of 2024. Here are my takeaways and thoughts. 19 states appear to have been seceded from the Union and are called the Western Forces, as well as the Florida Alliance. They specifically said the Florida Alliance in that movie, which I thought was very specific and interesting, because if any state, in my opinion, were to secede from the Union right now over major political differences and irreconcilable cultural differences, I think it would be Florida, probably, at this point in time. So that's just interesting to think about. They appear to be in a war against the U.S. government. You heard, we paused it and reset it on the trailer. The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th. They said that on the trailer, which I thought was interesting. The U.S. military appears to be activated and fighting against Americans to the point of dropping airstrikes on American citizens. At the 8-second mark, and I didn't even catch this the first time that I watched this, but I thought this was fascinating. At the 8-second mark of this trailer, they say the 3-term president, insinuating that we no longer are following constitutional law limiting presidents to 2 terms in office. We have completely restructured, to some degree, at least the executive branch of the federal government, where the president has been in positions of power for at least 3 terms, 2+ terms, which is really crazy to think about if you play the tinfoil hat game a whole lot like me. At the 41-second mark, there is a map in the reflection which appears to depict the factions of the country. So like the existing country, the United States of America, and the Western states, what do they call them? The Western Forces and the Florida Alliance. And the way that they depict these two factions is with blue and red colors on the map, insinuating that the people who have seceded from the Union and the people who are fighting back against the federal government have a different political affiliation. One is leftist, liberal, Democrat Party oriented. One is right-wing conservative Republican Party oriented, which I find very imagery fascinating. At the 51-second mark, there is a sign on the building that says Jesus Saves, perhaps insinuating that the states that have seceded from the Union at this point are trying to preserve their freedom of religion, which no longer exists in the United States in this hypothetical dystopian future reality. The story appears to follow a team of journalists. I noticed that right away. It looked like it was a team of press who was following around the different factions fighting in this war and trying to capture it. That appears to me to be the plot, although it's a little bit difficult to tell from the first trailer, possibly trying to expose what's going on. And somebody says in the trailer, they shoot journalists on sight at the Capitol, which leads me to believe that in this theoretical dystopian future in this Civil War movie, we no longer have freedom of religion, because they just said that about the Jesus Saves concept with the sign on the building. And if we're shooting journalists on sight in the U.S. Capitol, we certainly don't have freedom of the press. So the way that my brain is interpreting all of this is that we live in this now dystopian, weird future, crazy, upside down authoritarian reality, which honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, it feels like we are marching closer and closer and closer to with every passing day in our country, where we no longer have any of the basic freedoms or liberties that we have too often taken for granted in our last 200 some years as a country. They just cease to exist, probably because we've sold people on this lie of safety over liberty, of security over freedom. So MJ Truth Ultra on Twitter says these are their key takeaways. This movie, in combination with the new Leave the World Behind movie that was directed by the Obamas, produced by the Obamas. I have not yet watched it, but it is on my weekend watch list. Dave Rubin has absolutely insisted that I watch this. Is not a coincidence. I guess this Leave the World Behind new show on Netflix, or movie, is it a show or a movie? I actually don't even know, but it's on Netflix, is also depicting a super dystopian, ultra weird reality in the future of America that follows a very similar feeling of this upcoming Civil War movie. And both of the trailers for these two things dropped this week together at the exact same time. This person on Twitter asks, is this a big red pill, or are they trying to instill fear into the hearts and minds of people? I don't know, but it appears Americans are being prepped for something very big. I will not be afraid. Neither should you. So it's really up to your own interpretation if you think that this Civil War movie is going to be some sort of predictive programming, if you think that something like this reasonably could be happening in the next few years or decades or in the near future, or if you think that it's just a commentary on how divided we are. And maybe life imitates art and not the other way around. Maybe some of these movies were put out as a theoretical possibility, and we loved the movie or we loved the book so much that humanity just naturally steered in that direction. We're going to go through a couple of different examples of that here in just a minute. But to me, as I'm watching this trailer for this movie, it feels just slightly too on the nose for this not to at least be a potential possibility in the next couple of years, certainly within my lifetime. And it's very fascinating to me, the very specific imagery that they are using throughout this trailer, with red states versus blue states, with the rebels embracing freedom of religion and freedom of the press and freedom of speech. They ask, what kind of American are you? Twice. He reiterated that question, the military guy there at the end, which begs me to believe that the people directing this film totally understand what I talk about all the time on the stream, that I say often we are living in two different Americas, two different realities, where what I'm experiencing and the news that I'm consuming and the values that I have are literally a 180-degree opposite to the other half of America, and we just continue dividing people more and more and more. It is mind-blowingly weird. And so the more I've looked into this conspiracy theory of predictive programming, the more I am, at the very least, scratching my head over the theoretical possibility that something like this, or something exactly like this, could happen in the next few years or decades. What do you think, chat? I don't know. We're going to go through some examples here in just a second, but I want to see what you guys all think is potentially going to happen. Silver Eagle on Instagram says, the scariest thing ever said by the government. We are here to help and to keep you safe. Jesse J says, predictive programming has been around for decades, so they are not guilty. They feel that they have to show the public what they are planning before they do it. Then the burden is on us instead of them. That is a super, super interesting prediction there. Alex asks, why does it still feel like it will all have an insane left-wing bias? Well, you know, it is the entertainment industry, so I doubt anything is really dramatically going to change that way. Optimistic Living doesn't think it's possible for Texas to team up with California. Well, you know, that is a bit far-fetched in the fictional realities of the world, but you never know. I mean, honestly, nothing surprises me from the last couple of years, so I do think it's something that is theoretically possible. Nitty Witty says this reminds him of during Star Wars in the Clone Wars when Palpatine played both sides of the conflict. That's super interesting, almost like you're intentionally trying to gaslight both sides. Omnifist Productions on Rumble said those who would give up an essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. Very, very well said. You guys are blowing this up in our YouTube chat, which is awesome. And people are saying, think about The Simpsons. Think about The Simpsons. I'm glad you brought up The Simpsons. So we're going to talk about a couple of different examples of where this might already be happening. And sorry in advance to totally explode your brain, but it is fascinating to think about. InterestingEngineering.com, which is like an engineering publication, put together a whole breakdown in January of last year on this conspiracy theory of predictive programming. And spoiler alert, they think that it's a whole load of hogwash and just major BS. But listen to how they describe it, because it is really fascinating to at least think about. They say predictive programming, how do movies, books, and TV shows predict the future? 9 years before the emergence and outbreak of the coronavirus. Sorry if this is getting slightly cut off on Instagram. We're working on it, I promise. Almost COVID-like situations were depicted in the movie Contagion, which was released in the year 2011. Did you guys ever go see the movie Contagion in theaters? It honestly was mind-blowing at the time. It was so far out of the realm of remote possibility that people would ever behave like this, or that society would break down so substantially like this, where people were, I don't know, breaking windows of stores and lighting things on fire because their brains had just completely shut down from a global virus and they were desperate to try to stay alive. And the media and the television industry had just gone completely into the fear-mongering of you are all going to die. Matt Damon is the main character in Contagion. Highly recommend if you've never seen it. I'm sure most of you probably have in a post-COVID reality because everybody's been talking about this movie from the last several years. But that movie came out in 2011, and I vividly remember going to see it in theaters thinking something like this could literally never happen. And look where we were in 2020. Interesting Engineering goes on and says, similarly, a Simpsons episode titled The City of New York versus Homer Simpson that originally aired in 1997 features a plot that eerily mirrors the 9/11 tragedy in some ways. There are some other fictional incidents from various books, movies, and TV shows that almost seem to predict what happened later in life, and many of them involve science and technology. Consider the early depictions of futuristic tech like AI, robots, and virtual reality, for example. They then go on to define predictive programming, and I'll explain why there's an image of the Titanic here in just a second because it's so wild to think about. Predictive programming is not a scientific theory, but a notion developed by contrarians and conspiracists who think that the world is run by a totalitarian government of lizard people or a powerful evil agency that fakes large-scale events to manipulate people's opinions and further increase their dominance. I don't know. Do we believe that the world is run by a totalitarian government of lizard people? I mean, we know Gavin Newsom is a lizard person. I think it's pretty safe to say that Nancy Pelosi is a lizard person. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with the body double situations at the White House and our president right now. Obviously, this is satire. Kind of. But for the fact checkers, it's satire. And maybe we do believe that a powerful evil agency, the World Economic Forum, that fakes large-scale events to manipulate people's opinions and further increase their dominance, somewhat is controlling the world. At the very least, they're controlling the products and the industries that we are consumers of every single day. They're controlling our food supply. They're controlling the entertainment that we consume. I don't think it's that far-fetched of a conspiracy to at least pull the curtain back a little bit and realize that there are much larger forces at play in the world we live in today, with the proverbial they, the people in positions of power, trying to control all of the things that you buy, consume, watch, engage with, and eventually, because of our behaviors, believe at the end of the day. So it's not that insane for me to think that that's at least a possibility, right? They go on to say conspiracy theorists claim that in order to prevent any sudden resistance or hostile reaction from the general public, the supreme totalitarian organization keeps adding subtle references to its planned future events in popular media so that when the event happens for real, the public is already mentally prepared and receptive to new developments in society. Is that really a conspiracy theory at this point, chat? Emrock says, no, this is very real. This is absolutely not a conspiracy theory. Yeah, I mean, hello. That's just where we're at right now. That's the reality of what we're living through. Okay? Not that confusing. Not that conspiratorial at this point. The notion was first described and proposed by conspiracist Alan Watt, who defines predictive programming as, quote, a subtle form of psychological conditioning provided by the media to acquaint the public with planned societal changes to be implemented by our leaders. If and when these changes are put through, the public will already be familiarized with them and will accept them as natural progressions, thus lessening possible public resistance and commotion. Supporters of the predictive programming theory, somewhat illogically, suggest that the government also employs this technique so that people don't lose trust in the already established system. They claim that first, the government plans a complex situation, then hides references of these things in the media so that people can become somewhat accustomed to the feelings caused by these situations, and finally, when the situation actually does arise, the people will look to the government for solutions. I don't think that's some crazy tinfoil hat thing to believe these days. Like, the curtain has very much been pulled back, especially from the media in the last several years, where I think the average American would absolutely believe that something like that is possible. Nitty Witty says, maybe not the lizard people, but there's absolutely a manipulating power with the elites. Omnifus Production says, I believe this is completely real. Like, maybe it's just because that's where we're at with this community of people and the conversations that we're having, but I've heard of much crazier ideas and much crazier concepts and way far out there conspiracy theories compared to the idea that the government is programming people to be okay when things go wrong, to look to the government for a solution. Like, duh. That's just so unbelievably obvious to me in their quest to retain power with this gerontocracy that refuses to give any power to anyone other than the existing elites in the, let's face it, uniparty in Washington, D.C. that are refusing to leave. That's not really a conspiracy. Sorry to break it to you. Interesting engineering. They say the conspiracists often argue that although governments already have the solution to the problem they created in the first place, they deliberately wait for the right time to implement the solution in order to cause the most damage to people's ability to think for themselves. Some believers even claim that predictive programming is actually a highly advanced form of AI, artificial intelligence, used for the psychological conditioning of the masses. Needless to say, these types of arguments are filled with logical fallacies, doctored footage and documents, outright lies, and a complete lack of proper scientific research or rigor. Well, this concept, I would argue, really goes back to George Orwell's 1984, which was the exact best example we could possibly look for within the realm of what we would consider to be predictive programming, right? If it's literally right in front of me. I got to move my coffee cups because I've had way too much coffee. But I talk about this all the time on the stream that I've just left my copy literally sitting on my desk. If you've ever read this book, it's incredibly obvious to me that either it was eerily successful in predicting what was going to happen in the future when it came to government propaganda and rewriting history, when it came to your inability to think for yourself. You had to engage in groupthink. When it came to a lack of dissent against the government, where that was not just criminalized, but would land you the death penalty. Like, that's absolutely the level of authoritarianism that we somewhat already have implemented in society, but also are inching closer and closer toward every day with the things that we have yet to implement. The best example of predictive programming is found between the pages of this book in George Orwell's 1984. I think the same thing could be said for Animal Farm. If you never had to read that growing up in school, or it wasn't mandatory reading for you, go pick up a copy. It literally took me about 40 minutes to get through all of Animal Farm. I am a fast reader, but like you could read it in an afternoon very, very easily. So either one of two things is happening here. These things know what's going to happen. The predictive programming models know what's going to happen in the future. Television, books, movies, etc. Or life imitates art. And in my opinion, both of those things are bad. I say all the time on the stream that the people in power, societal elites, seem to have been using this book not as a warning to be heeded, which was the intention of George Orwell behind publishing 1984, but rather as an instruction manual for Western society, where we are just implementing all of the crazy, horrible ideas of authoritarianism in this book and trying to spin it as a utopian, wonderful society. But maybe that's really what's happening here with all of these movies, with all of these TV shows, and the crazy, weird coincidences from things that have been published or released or put out into theaters in years past or decades past, eventually coming true. Maybe it's the other way around from predictive programming, that life just imitates art, and so that's how we react when similar things end up happening. I don't know which one is true, but if you're looking for specific examples, there are literally endless examples of predictive programming out there. Collider put this together, saying 30 movies that predicted, 30 movies that predicted the future in a very weird way. Movies from a few years or decades ago have made some pretty eerie predictions that seem far-fetched. It turns out the mind-numbing ideas that introduced crazy gadgets, bizarre technology, and impossible science might not be as ridiculous as we thought. Before we go through this list, does anybody have any specific examples that immediately come to mind about things that were predicted in movies or TV shows or books in the past? It's freaky for me to go through this list. Alex says, while we're waiting for that, the government saw the book 1984 as a guide, 1000%. I'm so fascinated by all of this. Anybody have a good example of things that have happened in the past? Obviously, The Simpsons come to mind. The Simpsons predicted that Trump would be president, for goodness sakes. They have been on the money over and over and over again. I'm convinced that one of them is a time traveler, one of the writers for this show. There's no other logical explanation for what is happening in The Simpsons. Omnifus Production says, in 1997, Wag the Dog was released, detailing a sex scandal involving the U.S. president who was running for re-election. 1 month later, Bill Clinton's scandal came to light. I don't think I've ever seen that movie, but I didn't realize it was that close together. I knew the film existed, but that is wild. Everybody says 9/11 was predicted in several different movies and TV shows. There are a few examples of that, and I'll pull that up here in just a second, but freaky. Oh, that's wild. Anybody else have one? John Best says 1984, Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies were all required reading in school. Obviously, I would argue 1984 and Animal Farm were predictive in some way, shape, or form. Grace says The Island with Scarlett Johansson is a good example of this. Interesting. I, Robot, Barlow Phil, great example. I, Robot is a great example. So I want to just go through a couple of these because if you're not already getting your wheels turning thinking about this in some capacity, this should make your brain literally explode. The Terminator, great example. Writer-director James Cameron not only regularly makes revolutionary advances on the technical side of filmmaking, but also manages to be eerily prescient in his stories when it comes to predicting technology. Obviously, the Terminator featured automated hunter-killer drones, not unlike the ones used in the modern military, although ours are 100% purple laser cannon and Skynet free for now. Ironically, the sci-fi classic also framed the way that we talk about the real-world development of artificial intelligence. The British have even given the designation Skynet to their network of military satellites, which is kind of like playing with fire. If the Terminator is an example of this, I mean, I couldn't think of a better one myself. It's exactly what ended up happening with unmanned drones in the military, and particularly with artificial intelligence. Freaky stuff. Super Mario Bros. Despite this adaptation of the classic Nintendo video game in 1993 being both a critical and commercial flop, it developed a strong fan base over the years, one that led to certain fans being unable to shake the movie's unsettling evocation of 9/11 8 years before it happened. So this is a still from the movie. And I guess what happens in this adaptation, I've actually never watched the 93 Super Mario Bros. The new Mario movie, total side note, slapped. It was really good. I was expecting it to be terrible, but it ended up being absolutely phenomenal. I think it's on Netflix now. It just came to Netflix a couple of weeks ago. So if you guys haven't watched it yet, Chris Pratt was shockingly a very good Mario. And I was not expecting that at all, but his "It's a me, a Mario" was absolutely phenomenal. So anyway, in this adaptation from 1993, I guess the realm of the Koopas and the realm of the real world end up clashing together, and they have to figure out how to somewhat deal with that or move forward from that. And when that's happening, a bunch of shells are being thrown at New York City, and they hit the Twin Towers. And eventually, in this 1993 Super Mario Bros. Adaptation of the Nintendo video game, the Twin Towers just like disappear from the New York skyline entirely. Freaky, right? They pan away from the skyline of the city. This was in 1993, so 8 years before 9/11 happened. They pan back, and there's massive structural damage to the Twin Towers until they are just completely out of sight from the film. That's freaky. Wild. The Truman Show, another great example. Jim Carrey, 1998. The summer hit The Truman Show is blamed for society's borderline obsession with the next phase of reality TV, programming geared around watching people conduct their everyday lives. I think that not only did that lead to a rise of reality TV, but also a massive rise of influencer lifestyle where we watch people get ready with me in the mornings, or we watch people do a day in the life of my life. Come follow me while I do this. Come on a trip with me. Come do my makeup with me. What's my makeup routine? Just like average everyday things. Those people have the largest followings on social media, namely on platforms like TikTok now. And obviously, I think that The Truman Show totally planted a seed in humanity's mind of like, oh, that's interesting. We should be consuming that as a regular piece of content. This one kind of surprised me on the list, but it was interesting to think about. You've Got Mail, also in 1998 with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Great movie, by the way. Adorable rom-com if you've never watched it. But listen to how they describe this, and it definitely makes you think. Leave it to Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan to give the sweetest version ever of online dating way back in the age of dial-up internet. Anybody in the chat even remember dial-up? I don't remember dial-up at all. That was before my time. But it's interesting to try to think about. Also, total side note, while my brain is just all over the place in a million different directions, do I have ADD? Probably. Never diagnosed. But anyway, if you ask kids today, like under the age of 12, to act like they're talking on the phone, like pretend like you're talking on the phone with just your hand. When I was a kid, we would all do this because you would pick up the landline and have to call your friends and call your family and like remember the number. I guess if you ask a child under the age of 12 today, this went viral the other day, to act like they're talking on the phone, pretend like they're talking on the phone, they'll go like this. They'll like take a flat hand and put it up against their face because that's all they've ever known is the world of the iPhone. So total side note, but things like that with the landlines and dial-up internet I think is so fascinating, and how quickly technology is developing from a generational perspective. Total side note, back to You've Got Mail. The way that they described this blew my mind. They said the two stars meet cute via ancient AOL email messages, served as the beta version for how future dating apps and services like Tinder and OkCupid would work to help make dating easier ... ish. The movie also makes a strong argument for personal contact being the best way to forge a romantic connection. When you watch that movie now, I guess you don't think about how revolutionary it was at the time, or how much it completely changed the concept of dating when they were sending cute little AOL messages. But now, I mean, I talked about it on People of the Internet today, dating has become so hyper technologized. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to make it a word today, where it's supposed to be easier to meet people because you just swipe and you go back and forth and da-da-da-da-da. But is it really easier? I don't know. At the very least, it has certainly been normalized to be that way. Right? Crazy. War Games in 1983. I don't know if you guys have seen this film. Unbelievably phenomenal film. I won't give you the whole synopsis right now because we're going example by example, but War Games made the case, says Collider, that hacking, while intentionally innocuous here, would become much more weaponized in subsequent years, most notably in the recent U.S. presidential election. What War Games lacks in step-by-step technical processes for its brand of hacking, it more than makes up for with its foreshadowing of the internet at a time when the internet didn't even exist. This stuff will make your brain like explode. And again, is this predictive programming in the entertainment industry or books or movies, knowing what's going to happen before we know? Or is this art imitating life? I don't know. But either way, it's enough to try to make your head explode, to be honest. One more, and then I want to see your guys' thoughts in the chat. So don't forget to be dropping your guys' examples of this in the chat while we're doing this. But Blade Runner, both Blade Runner in 1982 and Blade Runner 2049, the new one with Ryan Gosling, slap. Blade Runner is such a good movie, and if you've never watched it, that's your weekend homework, especially the new one. I thought they did such a great job with Blade Runner 2049 and could absolutely be the type of world that we live in today. They say Blade Runner in 1982, the original one, the rain-slicked, neon-lit future of Blade Runner's 2019 Los Angeles has yet to fully manifest in the real 2019. This was a few years ago. But some of the landmark sci-fi films concepts have absolutely taken root, in particular the spinner, off-world travel, and digital billboards. Something that looks like this, like a digital billboard, would have been completely impossible when this movie came out in 1982. But imagine driving around a city today and not seeing digital billboards. Like, that absolutely is the norm. Today, digital billboards are practically everywhere, most notably in major sites like Times Square or, ironically, modern-day Los Angeles. And while the spinner and all of its flying car glory have yet to become things that we can purchase at CarMax, Germany has rolled out plans for a flying car, and we certainly have autonomous cars that can drive themselves. So I don't think it's that far out of the realm of predictive programming that we would have something as futuristic as a flying car. We just have yet to fly them. We would instead prefer to have autonomous driving cars. The other example that wasn't necessarily listed in this list, but immediately came to mind for me was Ready Player One. Have you guys ever seen this movie, Ready Player One? Phenomenal. Also part of your weekend homework if you guys have never seen it. But before the concept of the metaverse, before the concept of virtual reality with the goggles, before the concept of AI even remotely existed in the real world, this movie Ready Player One created a whole fictional storyline of what would happen in a dystopian future where basically the real world, the world that we live in, the tangible three-dimensional world, sucks. Everybody's incredibly poor. The government has way too much power. Everybody lives in these like stacked trailer homes, and it kind of looks like WALL-E in like this destroyed Earth dystopian future where we've taken no care for the environment, and so everything is just a giant trash heap, giant dump essentially. And so people are living in these like stacked trailers, but some genius video game programmer created a metaverse where everybody goes every day to escape the horrible reality of the real world that they are living through. So like your job is in the metaverse. All of your friends are in the metaverse. Your relationships, your intimacy is in the metaverse. And there's this huge quest adventure that everybody's participating in to try to like ultimately win the game. But there's all these different side quests or side gigs that you can participate in this overall overarching video game where all of a sudden real life is happening through your goggles. Real life is not happening in the three-dimensional world. And it gets so advanced that it's not just the goggles that you put on, and now we have those, which blows my mind with like the Meta Quest and all of that stuff. But they also had hepatic suits in Ready Player One where if you are touched, if you're punched, if you're kissed in the metaverse, you'd be able to feel it in real life. You wear these suits that like would constrict on your arm if you got punched, so you would feel pain and all of these different things. They are actually developing those in real time for the world that we live in right now too. So whether that's predictive programming or life imitating art, it's wild to me how often we are seeing stuff like this unfold in real life. Blows my mind that this is the world that we are living through. So with all of those examples in mind and with all of the conspiracy theories unfolding on Twitter today, do you guys think that this new Civil War movie might be predictive programming, or do you think that this might be just a theoretical possibility based on the division that we have today? I don't know. Dutch Canadian says Winston Churchill predicted a bunch of stuff that came into fruition. God, if we could only have a leader like Winston Churchill again. Have you guys been watching The Crown? The Crown just came back out with the final few episodes of the whole series. And in the early seasons of The Crown, maybe their best casting ever was the guy that they got to play Winston Churchill. Floored me. That show has unbelievably good casting. Unbelievably good casting. Alex says, I now have so many movies to watch. LOL. Red4 says, 90s TV and movies were very prophetic. I've mentioned it several times before, but the major social issues that we're seeing right now, like gender, gaslighting, etc., were all explored in episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's really creepy how accurate they were to what we are seeing now. Ooh, that is very eerie. Omnifus Productions keeps bringing up the Jetsons. Yeah. John Best says Blade Runner is crazy. It made Mad Max comes to mind with the breakdown of civilization. Mad Max is a great example of all of this. And on the topic of Blade Runner, not just the digital billboards, but in the remake of Blade Runner about the year 2049 in the future, they have these artificial intelligence wives. It's like a mail order bride, basically, but it's a hologram played by Ana de Armas, and she did a phenomenal job in playing this role. But they have these like fake artificial intelligence girlfriends and wives named Joy that everybody is married to and everybody has because it's too hard to meet people in the real world and get married to people in the real world. Talk about predictive programming while I'm wearing my tinfoil hat. We have artificial intelligence girlfriends and boyfriends now. This is a very real thing that already has come to fruition after that movie ended up coming out. Angel Moonwing on Instagram says the powers that be want to destroy the three-dimensional reality. Ooh, that is deep. That is very, very deep. Evans Collins says, wait, Captain America Civil War is getting re-released? No, it is the Civil War movie from A24, brand new movie that's coming out next spring. But there's another great example. Captain America Civil War is a phenomenally good example of how stuff like this might be a deeper meaning or a deeper conspiracy. The Avengers totally could nail on the head corruption within the government and where maybe the government isn't supposed to be the good guys that you trust. It's fascinating to me how often this is unfolding right before our very eyes, but also how little people actually are paying attention to the underlying themes of these movies. If you think about the Hunger Games and Star Wars and the Avengers and Harry Potter and every other great franchise that we absolutely have fallen in love with as a country, perhaps not the antagonist in the story or the main bad guy in the story, but at least a main antagonist or a main foil or bad guy in the story is always the government. Always. And yet people say that we should still trust the government. But every great story that we have fallen in love with, from books of what we would consider the classics of decades and centuries past to brand new movies that are coming out with every passing year and brand new video games and TV shows, all of them are centered around these ideas of individual autonomy, of individual freedom, of individual liberty, of freedom over security, of the government probably lying to you and saying propaganda to your face all day long. And yet the same people that have often fallen in love with these books and movies and TV shows draw such a blind eye to what's happening in real life. I will never fully be able to wrap my head around that or fully understand why that disconnect exists in the realm of the entertainment industry. But every good example out there would echo those fundamental truths about the universe, about humanity, about power structures, and why it is so important for us to continue fighting for autonomy, for civil rights, for truth in a truthless world. I'm really excited to do some more deep diving on this Civil War movie from A24 Movie Studios. I think it's going to be a really interesting watch in the theater, and I hope that you guys will all go see it too. Maybe we'll do a watch party of it here on the stream when it is able to come out, or in our locals community when it comes out next spring. I think that would be a super fun way for us to get to deep dive a little bit more in the next couple of months. But who knows? Is it predictive programming, or is it life imitating art? I guess we'll have to see in the next couple of decades and generations. The world may never know. All right, you guys, what a great stream today. Thank you so much for being here. Before you go, do me a huge favor and like this stream wherever you're watching. That could look like a thumbs up or a heart, depending on what platform you're on. And most importantly, please help me continue to grow these communities by hitting that follow or subscribe button. It will always be free to watch these streams because of you guys continuing to help us grow these communities at the grassroots level. And also thanks to the incredible generosity of our sponsors that help to make this stream possible. Today's sponsor of our stream are our amazing friends over at Public Square. You guys know them, you love them, but in case you're not already familiar, Public Square is a network of more than 70,000 small businesses here in the U.S., all of which are pro-life, pro-family, and pro-freedom, especially as we get closer and closer to Christmas and you're looking for businesses that you can feel really, really good about supporting when you're buying your Christmas gifts. Forget about spending all of your money at Target or Amazon. Public Square is where you need to be. Tons of you guys have already told me that you've also added your small business to Public Square, everything from a doctor's office to a coffee shop to somebody to help you do your taxes or a clothing company or anything in between. And it's made all of the difference in the world for your small business, getting a lot more eyes on your products. So you can use the link that I just dropped in our live chat to add your business to Public Square or to find some great places to shop for the holidays. And we are going to jump over for the next couple of minutes to our locals community for a fun little post-stream Q&A. If you guys don't already know this, our locals community is kind of like social media for people who hate social media, but it's a place with a lot more intimacy where you can get to know me a whole lot better. I can get to know you, and you can connect with a lot of people who share your values. We have some specific content that only exists over on locals related to dating and faith, and we've got some fun stuff coming to you this week on that note. So please consider joining us using the link that I just dropped in our live chat for that. Instagram, thanks for bearing with us while we figure out a great way to format the stream for you guys in a vertical sense. I'm hopeful that Instagram will change their mind and be able to do this horizontally where you can just turn your phone. We're submitting all kinds of feedback, but since streaming is brand new over there as of yesterday, we're going to figure out the best way moving forward to make it look great for you guys. Love you all so very much. We're back for the stream tomorrow at 3 p.m.-ish Eastern. We're not always on the dot, but that's okay. YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Getter, and Instagram. We will see you tomorrow. Locals, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.